Good afternoon. Delighted to be here to share with you our journey to fine-grained data security using Databricks Unity Catalog. My name is Jason Dominic. I am the product leader for Enterprise Data Lake and Data Platforms at Amgen. With me is Lakhan Prajapati. He's lead architect with our partner, CS Associates. Let me start by talking a little bit about Amgen. Amgen is a pioneer in biotechnology, and we are also a leader in the biopharmaceutical industry in the world. And our mission is simple, to serve patients. And we serve patients with these medicines that you see on the screen, which address very serious illness. And if you have not seen or heard about these medicines, that's actually a good thing, because all these medicines deal with or address very serious illness using proteins, monoclonal antibodies, and the other weapons in the biotechnology arsenal. So when we talk about biotechnology, we talk about creating medicines in a living cell. So considering the traditional pharmaceuticals, the oral medications that we are all familiar with, that's the product of a chemical process which can be repeated and can be repeated at an industrial scale. But when we talk about biotechnology, we are talking about creating, say, for example, a patient with a chronic kidney disease, and that patient needs a protein to produce red blood cells. And there is no choice but to bring that protein on a living cell to that patient. What that translates to is the whole process of discovery for a drug, the development of a drug, and the final delivery of the drug to a patient is very complex in the biopharmaceutical world. And that complexity is translated into, like, what are the compliance and the regulations that we need to follow during these phases of, like, the drug discovery, drug development, and the drug delivery. And that is our challenge that we are going to present today, about the governance on the data which is generated during each of these phases of this drug discovery, development, and delivery, how we solve that challenge using Unity Catalog. So that's a very high-level context on that. Just to give you a little more context on how we are organized. So we are part of a shared service organization in Amgen. We manage enterprise-wide data and analytics platforms, which are used by the various business functions in Amgen, like the operations, the R&D, the corporate functions, HR, finance, and global commerce. And when we started our enterprise data lake journey, our original goal was to have the data democratization, right? Make sure that trusted data is available as fast as possible for the consumer. And as we added more categories of data into the data lake, there was as we added more restricted, sensitive data, there was the need for more governance around the data that we were adding. And as a strategy, what we wanted to keep in place was the governance shouldn't be compromising our original strategy on data democratization. So we achieved that through mainly self-service and automation that we provided, where the users have that self-service ability to request for an access, and then the whole governance is implemented at the back end through the APIs, and how to automate it to whatever extent that is possible, right? And giving a little more context on our environment, this is our journey from to enterprise data lake and where we are right now. So we started in 2015 with a Hadoop environment, Cloudera on-prem, and we were using Sentry and Hive for our security. Then 2 years later, with our enterprise cloud strategy, and trying to get the benefits of elastic compute, we moved to AWS, and our data lake was moved to AWS, and we started our journey with Databricks with that. Along with that, we also implemented something like that self-service feature for data access. And we developed an in-house built data marketplace where users can come in and have a shopping cart experience of look at what's available in a catalog, then request for access. And that's the automation that we implemented. But moving to Databricks, one of the challenge was about providing that connected data for the enterprise. As I mentioned before, we are a shared service, and the whole objective of data lake was to provide that connected data for the whole enterprise to the from various business functions. That data is available as a connected data, and that was a big challenge to solve. As the way we organized in Databricks was we were having separate shards, and that each shard has its own Hive metastore. So we embarked on something for a centralized glue catalog, and that was completed close to between 2018 and 2020, and that actually solved that problem of connected data. And it is a mature data lake house with more than 100 applications using it. We have more than 13,000 databases, and it is still growing. But as I mentioned before, as we were adding more different categories or more sensitive data, more restricted data, there was the need for more finer grain of governance, right? That is at a user level, at a row column level, how we can achieve that. And that was a challenge with the AWS IAM roles. And that point, we started looking at third-party options. And actually, we piloted one application using a third-party option. And that actually worked. It could give us the access at a user level using policies. And we could also implement row column level access. But the biggest challenge was about the technology alignment between these two technologies, right? And there were challenges on scalability of that. And that's the point where Databricks introduced Unity Catalog. And we just jumped into that bandwagon. We did a POC, and there was an application which was ready to come on board. And we started our journey on Unity Catalog with that. So Lakan will now take you through that, the challenge I was mentioning, how we solved that using Unity Catalog. So many of the sessions this morning, they were talking about Unity Catalog as a concept, right? What we are sharing is what we exactly implemented and the real challenges that we face with that. And that is what is going to be the remainder of this presentation. Again, over to you.
Thanks, Jason. All right. So for the second part of this session, I'm going to touch a little bit about the specifics of implementation and learning we had between centralized glue catalog to Unity Catalog. I think Jason briefly already mentioned that we already have a very mature platform on glue catalog with IAM role. But as we were onboarding more and more functions, we started to receive more complex data control, data governance use cases. Few of them are mentioned over here. Like our HR function had a very unique request of controlling access for their restricted data on different personas. Likewise, our clinical group had a requirement about row-level access control for their different clinical studies and clinical teams that they have. At the same time, they needed to know who is accessing what, so needed like a real-time auditing capability. Furthermore, our research group also had similar requirement where they wanted to control data at document level and as well as user level. So all these use cases kind of made us realize we can't do that or can't scale it through IAM role and glue combo. So that's when the third-party tool came in. We did a couple of POCs and implementation and realized a few themes of challenges in that. Like all of those third-party tools kind of had an additional licensing cost. That's an added overhead to our enterprise IT. They were kind of disintegrated with our Databricks platform in a way. So policies, all those governance policies used to get managed separately, and there is some lag between the sync, or sometimes there are failure in those policy sync. There were issues in because of the disconnected nature, they were not compatible with latest DBR versions. Sometimes there are ways to bypass those governance policy through directly accessing storage layer. Basically, those all challenges or themes of those challenges made us realize we need something more native to Databricks. That's when we started having very serious evaluation of Unity Catalog. We did a lot of experiments again in terms of scaling, like the policy, how much of the policies we can scale, what type of complex access governance or access control use cases we can implement. At the same time, simplify our governance process, because by reducing or eliminating the need of IAM role, right? So those experiments were good, and but we really wanted to put Unity Catalog to good use, put it on a large program, and that's when we started collaborating with our finance group. So coincidentally, that finance group back then were going through their digital transformation journey. And like any other digital transformation, they were trying to move away from their legacy warehouse and legacy analytic systems to more modern technology stack. And that's when we collaborated with them, helped them set up the lakehouse architecture that you can see here. And we, from this, the group that we belong to are mainly partnering them to setting up the tooling for their engineering pipeline, as well as enabling consumption through the Databricks SQL warehouse. But the part where we most focus on is setting up dev environment for the Unity Catalog and access governance for their consumption layer, for their consumer through our self-serve governance portal, and approved through data owners and data stewards who can do manual approval and validation. All right. So let me talk a little bit about what's the complexity of that use case was, and why we felt that Unity Catalog is best fit here. So most of the finance data has been organized at a cost center level. So as you can see, one example here for head employee count, where each department count is maintained at a different cost center level. And then there are different personas involved, like there are readers and analysts, where analysts have access to all the columns, and reader can only access unrestricted columns. So both these kind of creates like a requirement of row level access control as well as column level access control, right? And at the same time, different personas are involved. So the way we went about solving this use case is, for all the different personas that we have, we created Databricks groups with different ACL controlling column level accesses. And then we created a security mapping between cost center and users associated to those cost center, and use those security mapping in our dynamic views to control row level. Like there's one example that you can see here, a person named Jason, who's an analyst, firing the same query on dynamic view, getting different result, while the person named Lakhan as a viewer can see different set of columns and different set of rows, because that's how the dynamic views apply. Little bit on dynamic views. Basically, whenever user fires a query on dynamic views, the IDs has been intercepted. That ID, we use it to correlate which cost center they have access to, which persona they belong to, and then that's how the dynamic view result the response back. All right. So there was one more additional complexity on this use case. And that was, those rules that I talk about, those personas can evolve, those cost centers can be, there are more cost centers can get added. Users can switch between one cost center to another. So basically, there were dynamic, it was a dynamic nature of this use case, which requires a self-serve capability, and we solve it through our automated access governance workflow. So what we did here, and like Jason mentioned, we already had a mature platform on Glue Catalog, where user can come and request access. We just extended our platform to also incorporate or accommodate Unity Catalog access control. So I'm just going to do a brief about like what's the step involved in that workflow. The first step, anyone from finance group can come in our portal, discover or find the assets that they need access on. They can select the attributes, the cost center, the persona that they need access on. And then once they hit the request, a request is formulated in a form of an email, send it to data owner, where they can come back to our portal, validate that request, and then approve or reject it. Based on approval or rejection, the backend job, which is in our Kubernetes platform, runs a job in Databricks, which in turn update any ACLs that are needed to be updated, any security mapping that needs to be updated, or our users need to be added into different Databricks group that we have created. And that's it. Once that is done, another email is generated back to the requester where they can go back and start using or accessing the data. All right. So this use case has been like a great success. We had almost more than 200 users started using the application. We reduced the overall turnaround time of access from few weeks to few hours now. But it was not all throughout a happy journey, or there were a lot of learning. And as an enterprise group, we didn't want it to just stop there. We wanted to make it like scale it at an enterprise level, right? And that's when we were devising our enterprise scale strategy. We have some few considerations that this group can take back as well. So starting with the Unity Catalog, there is some limitation in how many external locations that you can create, right? So if you are planning to migrate all of your assets as an external table, do watch out for that. There is already a good Databricks sync utility available. We recently launched a few months ago, which can migrate your Glue assets or other high metastore assets to Unity Catalog. But it has some limitation that you should care about, like, for example, tables with high serializer, deserializer properties cannot be migrated, and managed table within Glue cannot be migrated. So for those, you need to manage those tables or assets separately. For complex use cases like where you are using Scala or R languages, those type of use cases right now you cannot basically deploy it in a shared environment. So users you need to create dedicated cluster for the users who are running those advanced ML workloads. Lastly, or the few more, there is no role concept like typical other data governance tool. There are no role concept in Unity Catalog, but you can get away with that by just creating Databricks account level groups. Then there are some nuances on migrating your AWS, like Databricks E2 workspace group to Unity Catalog, because Unity Catalog you cannot have ACLs applied on Databricks workspace level groups. So those groups needs to be migrated at an account level, and from there, Unity Catalog ACLs can be applied on it. And yeah, that's the takeaway. I would hand it back to Jason for the final comments and our brief about the enterprise transformation journey.
Yeah, thanks, Lagan. So as you see here, there were a lot of benefits that we got out of the Unity Catalog implementation. One thing is about the performance, right? As we move to Unity Catalog. Then another challenge was, as I mentioned before, like the auditability, right? Who has access to what, and find out who accessed what, right? On the restricted sensitive data. So that was a big win. Then all the added advantages of like the data lineage that you heard in the keynote this morning. The application teams who are already onboarded, they started using the data lineage for that. Also, we are looking at the delta sharing for sharing this data and how Unity Catalog can be used for that sharing outside of our enterprise. But our biggest benefit is the user experience, right? We simplified the user experience where a user can come in, again, through our data marketplace, where they have a shopping cart experience where they can request for whatever is the data asset which is available, and no other details are needed, right? They don't need to know which IAM role, which cluster they need to use. We also enabled Databricks SQL endpoints, so that makes that compute part easy. So it is a simplified user-based access. And as a strategy now, all our new applications we are onboarding into Unity Catalog. But that was the easiest part. The difficult part is what we are currently dealing with, where in our near term, Laghan was touching on that, right? Using the DB sync, or how to migrate the existing centralized glue catalog to Unity. And we are approaching it in two ways. One is the traditional migration, both the producer side, all the pipelines, everything moved to a managed tables, and then enable the consuming side with Unity Catalog. So what we are finding is that is going to be a time-consuming task. So we are also trying to see whether we can do a lift and shift of like a centralized team doing that, using something like a utility like a DB sync. And we have both those activities going on right now. And some of the learnings that Laghan shared also reflect on that, like what are the constraints when we are using the external location, external tables. But ideally, if that lift and shift works well for us, then our far-term goal can be not that far, right? Ideally, we would like to have all the 100% of our data access happening through Unity Catalog, right? If we do an external location, external table-based migration, that will be just the consuming side. Only the metadata will be converted. The physical tables will still exist in Glue, right? That's another technical challenge, right? We need to have our environment supporting both Glue assets and Unity. And that's what we currently have. And we have to live with that for some time till all this migration is over. But as I mentioned earlier, the regulatory requirements on biotechnology and the complexity of that whole biotechnology, drug discovery, development, and delivery, we expect that Unity Catalog can solve that. First of all, by reducing that complexity in an access at a user level, right? Like, so even if we can get all the consumption happen through Unity Catalog, that will solve a big challenge for us. And that's where we are heading. And that's our presentation. Thank you much for all your time. And if you have any questions on any topic we covered, feel free to bring that up now.
Thank you.